"I'm sorry, but the only table we have available is in the back corner near the kitchen." The host's dismissive tone cut through the elegant atmosphere as he gestured toward the restaurant's least desirable seating area. Gabrielle Washington looked around at the half-empty dining room, clearly seeing better tables available, but said nothing. What the host didn't know was that this unimportant customer was the food critic for the New York Times, and her review was about to cost the restaurant its reputation and millions in revenue. Le Bernardin Manhattan represented the pinnacle of fine dining in America, a temple to culinary excellence where Chef Eric Riepert had maintained 3 Michelin stars for over a decade. The restaurant's reputation was built on more than just exceptional food. It promised an experience that justified its $200 per person price point, from the moment guests stepped through its mahogany doors until their final bite of dessert. Located in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, it attracted celebrities, business moguls, and food enthusiasts who saved for months to afford a single meal. On this particular Friday evening in October, the restaurant hummed with its usual sophisticated energy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in crisp white linens, while servers in black vests moved with practiced precision between tables where New York's elite discussed million-dollar deals over perfectly prepared seafood. It was the kind of place where appearances mattered, where the right table could signal status and the wrong one could feel like exile. Gabrielle Washington understood this dynamic better than most. At 34, she had spent the last 8 years as the food critic for the New York Times, a position that gave her enormous influence over the city's restaurant scene. Her reviews could turn unknown chefs into celebrities overnight, fill empty restaurants for months, or close establishments that had operated for decades. She approached each meal with the same journalistic rigor she'd learned at Yale, understanding that her words carried weight far beyond simple food critique. The key to Gabrielle's success was her anonymity. Unlike some critics who dined openly and accepted the royal treatment that came with recognition, she preferred to experience restaurants as any ordinary customer would. She made reservations under different names, paid with personal credit cards, and dressed to blend in rather than stand out. This approach allowed her to see past the performance restaurants put on for VIPs and evaluate the true quality of service every customer could expect. Tonight's visit to Le Bernardin was part of a follow-up review, her second anonymous visit to evaluate whether the restaurant maintained its standards consistently. Her first visit 3 months earlier had been flawless. She'd been seated at a prime table overlooking the dining room, received attentive service throughout the evening, and enjoyed what she'd described in her notes as a master class in hospitality. But she'd heard whispers from other diners about inconsistent treatment, particularly for customers who didn't immediately appear to belong in such an exclusive establishment. As she approached the host stand, Gabrielle had deliberately chosen her appearance to test these rumors. Instead of the designer dress and expensive jewelry she might have worn to blend in with Le Bernardin's typical clientele, she'd opted for a simple black dress from Target, modest jewelry, and a handbag that, while tasteful, clearly wasn't a luxury brand. She wanted to see how the restaurant treated someone who looked like they might be stretching their budget for a special occasion rather than a regular customer for whom $400. The host, Marcel Dubois, was a 28-year-old aspiring actor who'd worked at Le Bernardin for 2 years while pursuing roles in off-Broadway productions. Marcel took pride in his ability to quickly assess customers and seat them accordingly, a skill he believed enhanced the restaurant atmosphere by ensuring that the right people were positioned prominently, while those who might not appreciate the finer aspects of the experience were placed more discreetly. To Marcel, this wasn't discrimination, it was curation. When Gabrielle presented herself at the host stand, Marcel's trained eye immediately categorized her. Mid-30s black woman, alone, modestly dressed, no obvious signs of wealth or status. She had a reservation. Washington, party of 1 for 8 o'clock. But Marcel's experience told him this was likely someone celebrating a birthday or anniversary, not a regular customer who would be returning frequently or recommending the restaurant to other VIPs. Washington, Marcel said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "Welcome to Le Bernardin. I'm sorry, but the only table we have available is in the back corner near the kitchen." Gabrielle's journalist instincts immediately picked up on the inconsistency. She could clearly see several empty tables in the main dining room, a four-top by the window, two intimate tables for two in the restaurant's prime central section, and a banquette that would have been perfect for a solo diner. But she said nothing, allowing Marcel to lead her to table 47, tucked behind a column in the back corner where the constant traffic of servers carrying dishes to and from the kitchen created a much less pleasant dining atmosphere. The table was clean and properly set, but everything about its location screamed afterthought. The lighting was harsher, the ambient noise from the kitchen was noticeable, and the view consisted mainly of the service station where servers picked up bread and water. It was the kind of table restaurants used to accommodate customers they couldn't turn away but didn't particularly want to showcase. As Gabrielle settled into her seat, she began her mental notes. The treatment started before she'd even ordered, and it told a story about how Le Bernardin really operated when they thought no one important was watching. She pulled out her phone and discreetly began documenting her experience, knowing that every detail would find its way into what was becoming a very different kind of review. The evening continued to unfold in ways that confirmed Gabrielle's suspicion. Her server, Amanda, was polite but perfunctory, lacking the detailed knowledge of ingredients and preparation methods that servers at other tables displayed when describing dishes to their customers. The sommelier, who spent considerable time discussing wine pairings with a couple at a nearby prime table, barely acknowledged Gabrielle's presence when she inquired about wine selections. Most tellingly, the pacing of her meal was noticeably different from what she observed around her. While other diners enjoyed leisurely conversations between courses, Gabrielle's dishes arrived with restaurant efficiency rather than fine dining rhythm. It became clear that the kitchen had been instructed to move her along rather than provide the full Le Bernardin experience. As the evening progressed, Gabrielle watched the dining room with the trained eye of someone who understood restaurant operations. She saw how other solo diners, specifically well-dressed white women who appeared to be business executives or wealthy tourists, were seated at prominent tables and received markedly different service. She observed how servers lit up when approaching certain tables while treating others with professional courtesy that lacked genuine warmth. The food itself was exceptional, as she'd expected. Eric Riepert's kitchen maintained its high standards regardless of who was eating, and every dish that arrived at her corner table was prepared with the same technical excellence that had earned the restaurant its reputation. But Gabrielle understood that fine dining was about more than just food. It was about the complete experience, the feeling of being valued and welcomed, the sense that you were participating in something special rather than merely consuming a meal. By the time dessert arrived, Gabrielle had filled several pages of notes on her phone. She documented the seating disparity, the service differences, the pacing issues, and most importantly, the clear pattern of treatment that suggested Le Bernardin operated with two distinct service standards depending on their assessment of each customer's importance. As she requested her check, Gabrielle made one final test. She asked Amanda about the possibility of speaking with the chef, a common practice for food enthusiasts at high-end restaurants. Amanda's response was polite but dismissive. "Chef Rippert is very busy this evening, but I'll be sure to pass along your compliment." At the same time, Gabrielle could hear Amanda's colleague arranging a kitchen tour for guests at table 12, explaining that the chef would be delighted to meet them personally. The check arrived quickly, and Gabrielle paid with her personal credit card, leaving a standard 20% tip despite the subpar service. As she gathered her things to leave, she took one last look around the dining room, mentally composing the review that would appear in the New York Times within the week. Marcel appeared at her table as she prepared to leave, his professional smile firmly in place. "I hope you enjoyed your evening with us, Ms. Washington. We appreciate your business and hope you'll consider Le Bernardin for future special occasions." "Oh, I will definitely be writing about this experience," Gabrielle replied with a smile of her own. "Thank you for such an educational evening." Marcel interpreted this as a satisfied customer planning to recommend the restaurant to friends, completely missing the deeper meaning in her words. As Gabrielle walked toward the exit, passing the prime tables where other diners were still enjoying their leisurely meals, she knew that her next column would be one of the most important pieces she'd ever written. The review that appeared in the New York Times the following Wednesday was titled "Le Bernardin, when excellence comes with conditions. Gabrielle's prose was measured but devastating, documenting in precise detail how one of the city's most celebrated restaurants provided dramatically different experiences based on their assessment of each customer's worth. She described the seating disparity, the service inconsistencies, and the clear pattern of discrimination she'd witnessed. But more than just criticizing Le Bernardin, she used the review to examine the broader issue of how fine dining establishments often operated with informal hierarchies that determined who deserved their best service. A restaurant's true character, she wrote, is revealed not in how they treat their most important customers, but in how they treat everyone else. Le Bernardin's kitchen continues to produce food worthy of its reputation, but the dining room operates with a troubling double standard that diminishes the experience for customers deemed less valuable by staff who have appointed themselves as arbiters of worth. The review included specific details about her evening, the available table she wasn't offered, the rushed service, the differential treatment she observed, all documented with the precision of an investigative journalist. She concluded by questioning whether a restaurant that couldn't provide consistent service deserved to maintain its position among the city's elite establishments. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The review was shared thousands of times on social media, with other diners sharing their own stories of similar treatment at high-end restaurants. The hashtag #LeBernardin, while black, began trending, with people of color recounting experiences of being seated in less desirable locations or receiving subpar service at expensive establishments. Within 48 hours of the review's publication, Le Bernardin's reservation system was flooded with cancellations. Regular customers called to express their disappointment, corporate clients postponed planned events, and food industry professionals began distancing themselves from the restaurant. The Michelin Guide announced they would be conducting an unscheduled review to evaluate whether the restaurant's service standards still met their criteria for 3-star status. Eric Rippert, who had built his reputation on both culinary excellence and hospitality, was devastated by the revelation that his front-of-house staff had been providing inconsistent service. Within a week of the review's publication, he had implemented mandatory retraining for all service staff, established new policies for table assignments, and personally called Gabrielle to apologize and invite her back for a meal that would represent the true Le Bernardin experience. Marcel Dubois found himself unemployed within days of the review's publication. The restaurant's management, conducting their own investigation into Gabrielle's claims, discovered a pattern of similar behavior that had previously gone unnoticed by leadership focused primarily on kitchen operations. Other staff members came forward with stories of Marcel's tendency to prejudge customers and seat them accordingly, a practice that had been tolerated as long as VIP customers remained happy. For Gabrielle, the experience reinforced why her work mattered beyond simple restaurant criticism. Her review had exposed a systemic issue that affected countless diners who deserved better treatment regardless of how they appeared to hostesses and servers, making snap judgments about their worth. The broader impact extended beyond Le Bernardin. Other high-end restaurants in the city began reviewing their own service policies, recognizing that in an age of social media and instant communication, discriminatory practices could be exposed and punished more quickly than ever before. Several establishments implemented anonymous review programs, encouraging staff to evaluate whether they provided consistent service regardless of customer demographics. Industry publications used Gabrielle's review as a case study in hospitality training, demonstrating how unconscious bias could undermine even the most celebrated establishments. Culinary schools began incorporating discussions of service equity into their curricula, ensuring that future hospitality professionals understood the importance of treating every customer with equal respect. 6 months after the review's publication, Gabrielle returned to Le Bernardin under her own name, accepting Eric Rippert's invitation to experience the restaurant's renewed commitment to hospitality. The difference was remarkable, not just in her own treatment, but in what she observed throughout the dining room. Service was uniformly excellent, regardless of table location or customer appearance, and the atmosphere felt more genuinely welcoming than during her anonymous visit. The follow-up review she published was positive but measured, acknowledging the improvements while noting that change shouldn't require public humiliation to implement. Le Bernardin has demonstrated that excellence in service, like excellence in cuisine, requires constant attention and commitment, she wrote. The question for all of us in the industry is why it took exposure, rather than leadership, to address these fundamental hospitality standards. Today, Le Bernardin continues to operate as one of New York's premier restaurants, but with policies and training programs designed to ensure that every customer receives the same level of care and attention. Gabrielle's review remains required reading in hospitality management courses, a reminder that in fine dining, how you make people feel is just as important as what you serve them. The corner table where Gabrielle had been seated that October evening is still in use, but it's no longer relegated to customers the staff deems less important. Instead, it serves as a constant reminder that every seat in the house should offer a world-class experience, and that true hospitality means seeing every customer as worthy of your best effort. For Gabrielle Washington, the evening at Le Bernardin became one of her most significant pieces of journalism, not because it destroyed a restaurant, but because it used the power of food criticism to address larger questions of equity, respect, and what it truly means to provide hospitality in America's most celebrated dining establishment. 10 years later, the Gabrielle Washington Institute for Hospitality Equity. A decade after that transformative evening at Le Bernardin, Gabrielle Washington had evolved from food critic to industry reformer. The Gabrielle Washington Institute for Hospitality Equity, established with funding from major restaurant groups and hospitality organizations, had become the premier training center for bias-free service in the culinary world. The Institute's headquarters, located in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, housed state-of-the-art training kitchens, mock dining rooms, and classrooms, where thousands of hospitality professionals learned to recognize and eliminate discriminatory practices. The curriculum, developed in partnership with Cornell's School of Hotel Administration and the Culinary Institute of America, had been adopted by restaurants, hotels, and service establishments across the globe. Gabrielle often reflected on how that single evening of poor treatment had sparked a movement that touched every corner of the hospitality industry. The Washington Protocol, named in her honor, had become the gold standard for equitable service training. The protocol required establishments to demonstrate consistent service quality regardless of customer demographics, with regular anonymous audits and certification requirements that many insurance companies now demanded for coverage. Marcel Dubois, the former Le Bernardin host whose discrimination had catalyzed these changes, had undergone his own remarkable transformation. After losing his job and facing public scrutiny, he'd enrolled in the Institute's intensive bias recognition program. His journey from perpetrator to advocate had become one of the Institute's most powerful teaching tools. "I was that person," Marcel would tell incoming students during orientation sessions. "I looked at customers and made instant decisions about their worth based on appearance, age, and race. I thought I was protecting the restaurant's atmosphere, but I was actually destroying its soul. Every day I work here is an attempt to undo the harm I caused and prevent others from making the same mistakes." Marcel's story was featured in the Institute's documentary series Faces of Change, which followed hospitality workers who had undergone bias training and completely transformed their approach to customer service. The series had been viewed over 2 million times on streaming platforms and was required viewing at culinary schools worldwide. The Institute's research division had produced groundbreaking studies on the economic impact of discrimination in hospitality. Their landmark report, The Hidden Cost of Bias, revealed that discriminatory practices cost the restaurant industry an estimated $2.3 billion annually in lost revenue, negative reviews, and reputation damage. The study tracked customer spending patterns across different demographics and found that establishments with consistent service policies saw 23% higher repeat business and 31% more positive online reviews. These findings had convinced even the most skeptical restaurant owners that equity wasn't just morally right, it was financially essential. Major chains like Marriott, Hilton, and McDonald's had implemented institute-developed training programs, while independent establishments sought certification as a competitive advantage in attracting diverse clientele. Le Bernardin itself had become a case study in successful bias remediation. Under Eric Rippert's continued leadership and with comprehensive staff training, the restaurant had not only maintained its 3 Michelin stars, but had seen a 40% increase in diverse clientele over the decade following Gabrielle's review. The restaurant now employed bias recognition specialists who conducted quarterly audits to ensure consistent service standards. The Institute's Secret Diner program had trained over 500 anonymous reviewers who regularly evaluated restaurants across the country. Unlike traditional food critics focused solely on cuisine, these reviewers assessed service equity, documenting disparities in treatment and working with establishments to address identified issues. The program had prevented countless discrimination incidents and helped hundreds of restaurants improve their practices before problems became public relations disasters. Gabrielle's influence extended beyond restaurants into hotels, retail establishments, and even healthcare facilities. The Institute's medical division trained hospital staff to provide equitable care regardless of patient appearance or perceived socioeconomic status, addressing bias that could literally be life-threatening in healthcare settings. The Institute's international program had expanded to 23 countries, adapting bias recognition training for different cultural contexts while maintaining core principles of dignity and respect. In London, Paris, Tokyo, and São Paulo, hospitality workers learned to recognize and overcome unconscious prejudices that affected customer experiences. Technology played an increasingly important role in the Institute's work. Their mobile app, Service Check, allowed customers to anonymously report discriminatory treatment while providing restaurants with real-time feedback on service quality. The app's data helped identify patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed, enabling proactive intervention before problems escalated. The Institute's annual Equity and Excellence Awards recognized establishments that demonstrated outstanding commitment to bias-free service. Winners received not just recognition, but also increased business from customers who valued inclusive hospitality. The awards had become so prestigious that restaurants competed intensively for inclusion, driving industry-wide improvements in service standards. Gabrielle's memoir, A Seat at Every Table: How One Review Changed an Industry, had become required reading in business schools and hospitality programs. The book detailed not just her experience at Le Bernardin, but the broader systemic issues that allowed discrimination to flourish in service industries. Proceeds from the book funded scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing careers in hospitality management. The Institute's youth program worked with high schools in underserved communities to introduce students to hospitality careers while teaching bias recognition from the start of their professional development. Many program graduates had gone on to become managers and owners who prioritized equitable service in their own establishments. Corporate partnerships had enabled the Institute to scale its impact exponentially. Major credit card companies included bias-free service training in their merchant agreements, while review platforms like Yelp and OpenTable integrated equity assessments into their restaurant ratings. These partnerships created market incentives for inclusive practices that reinforced training with economic consequences. The Institute's Crisis Management Division helped establishments that had experienced discrimination incidents to rebuild their reputations through comprehensive reform programs. Rather than simply managing public relations damage, these interventions addressed root causes and implemented sustainable changes that prevented future problems. Research showed that restaurants implementing Institute protocols saw measurable improvements across all customer demographics. Service times became more consistent, complaint rates decreased by an average of 45%, and customer satisfaction scores improved significantly. Most importantly, the percentage of customers who felt unwelcome or discriminated against dropped to near zero levels in certified establishments. Gabrielle's original review of Le Bernardin had been archived in the Smithsonian's collection on civil rights journalism, recognized as a pivotal moment when food criticism transcended cuisine to address social justice. The review was studied in journalism schools as an example of how specialized reporting could drive systemic change beyond its immediate subject matter. The Institute's latest initiative focused on artificial intelligence and bias recognition, developing algorithms that could identify discriminatory patterns in service data and alert management to potential problems. This technology promised to make bias detection even more precise and immediate, creating systems that could prevent discrimination before it occurred. As Gabrielle stood in the Institute's main auditorium, watching a new class of hospitality professionals commit to bias-free service, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. That frustrating evening at a corner table near the kitchen had evolved into a global movement that touched millions of lives and transformed entire industries. The corner table at Le Bernardin still existed, but it was no longer a place of exile. Instead, it had been transformed into the Washington table, where staff members periodically dined to experience the restaurant from a customer's perspective and ensure that every seat offered the same level of excellence. Marcel Dubois, now the Institute's Director of Reformed Practice Training, often brought new students to that table to share his story and demonstrate how even the most problematic locations could be transformed into symbols of positive change. The table served as a tangible reminder that progress was possible when organizations committed to genuine reform rather than superficial adjustments. For the thousands of hospitality workers who had completed institute training, that corner table represented something profound: the understanding that every customer deserved respect, dignity, and excellence, regardless of how they appeared to staff members making split-second judgments about their worth. The evening that had begun with discrimination and dismissal had become the foundation for an industry-wide transformation that continued to evolve and expand. And in restaurants around the world, customers of all backgrounds could sit at any table knowing they would be treated with the respect that excellent hospitality required.